Hi, everybody. This is Tony Nash with Complete Intelligence. Thanks for joining us for another quick hit. Today, we've got two great guests to talk to us about geopolitical risk. We spoke to them about 5 months ago. We've got Christopher Balding and Albert Marko. This time, we're talking about China. We've seen some buildup of China's activity toward Taiwan, especially over the last month. And we wanted to kind of have a deeper discussion about one of the big questions that is out there, which is, will China invade Taiwan? And is that a viable, likely possibility, or is it just saber rattling to kind of shake things up a little bit? With the new Biden administration and the change over there is potentially an opportunity for China to take a more aggressive stance toward Taiwan and toward the region and toward the U.S. So we're joined by Chris Balding and Albert Marko to talk about this. So let's kind of go through your basic thesis, each one of you, and then we'll get a little bit deeper and make it fun. Okay, so Chris, what's your position? China invade Taiwan. Do you think it's something that is possible and or likely?
So I think I would put like what we think of as a full-scale invasion, where there's soldiers in rubber rafts storming the beaches of Taiwan. I think that is relatively unlikely as a scenario, but I do think what is much more likely, and I would put it, probably above 50%, is some type of escalated conflict either in the East or South China Sea over the next 18 months as distinctly possible. And when I say that, let me emphasize, I think we're talking a range of possibilities. This could be everything from, a PLA Navy boat ramming a Taiwanese fishing boat. It could mean, blowing up a shoal or something like that they're fighting with Vietnam about. So I think there's a range of possibilities, but some type of conflict within the next 18 months, I think, is distinctly possible. And the reason I say 18 months is Xi will be going up for election of his third term in about 18 months. So I think that is a very important time period. And I guarantee you, Xi and those around him know what basically they're looking to accomplish within those 18 months. And I think you have a number of complicating factors. It's not uncommon for Chinese leadership to say, hey, there's a changeover in the U.S. Let's see what we can get away with. Let's push it. That's not why they would do it. The timing is fortuitous. So I do think some type of escalation in the East and South China Sea over the next 18 months is likely.
Okay. Albert, what do you think?
Well, China likes to poke and they like to prod and they like to test the perimeters of defenses, like most nations. When it comes to offensive capabilities, they want to test their adversaries' defensive capabilities. Do I think that there's going to be some kind of escalation? Well, I kind of agree with Chris there. I think something might happen along those lines, but I don't think it would be anything very serious. China would have to be. They would need an assurance of a quick and decisive victory if they were to attempt something like that. I mean, like you said, well, obviously, a full-scale invasion is definitely not going to happen. But even blowing up a shawl or taking out a couple fishing trawlers and whatnot, they certainly don't want to sit there and affect, their shipping lanes. Which, I mean, Taiwan Straits and that entire region, some of the biggest is the world's biggest trading lanes for ships. You can't have the United States running there with an armada just to protect Taiwan. It would adversely affect the Chinese economy. Xi at that point in 18 months, like he's running up for election, like Chris said, he can't afford any kind of hiccups right now in the Chinese economy. And most of the CCP's elite are ingrained with Taiwanese companies. So for them to sit there and disrupt that wealth, I just don't see it happening.
Okay, so we saw, I think over the last week, where the Chinese government said that, or they voted in some motions that China can now defend itself in its kind of claimed territorial waters. With China expanding its claims, whether it's with India, whether it's South China Sea, whether, wherever it is, it seems to me that they're telegraphing a more aggressive stance. So do we expect that? Is that just a warning that is fairly hollow, but they just want to put it out there? Or is that something that we believe they'll act on in, let's say against the Philippines or Vietnam or Taiwan or Japan or something like that? Like, could we see the claim over maybe the Senkaku Islands go hot at some point, for some phosphorus hills or whatever? I don't know.
So I think one of the things is that, a lot of this follows the very similar pattern of what we call salami slicing. Is, over the course of a couple of years, they just continue to slice away and slice away and slice away until it's like, this is the last, logical step in, progression of, some type of escalation or something like that. I think that's a similar type of strategy. And so that's part of why I say, is a full-scale invasion of Taiwan likely? No, I don't think it is. I generally agree with Albert in that sense, that I would put it as a very low probability type of event. Are there other types of conflicts that may take place? Whether that is, we've seen Taiwan or Chinese Navy and fishing vessels circle islands and stuff like that. Absolutely, I think it's relatively likely. I would say probably in the neighborhood of 50% over the next 18 months that we see some type of something like that. I would also say there's been very under the radar moves in the sense that within the past, let's say, I think within the past year, maybe 18 months, she replaced key generals that oversaw the southern and eastern areas, which are, very closely, tied to Taiwan and things like that. So I think those are things, it's like, if you look at it, let's put it this way, if there's not some type of conflict, they've taken all the moves that seem to signal that, yes, that they are, at the very least, they want to stick out their chest a lot more in these areas. And I think probably the one area where I would fundamentally disagree with Albert is that I think he's perfectly right on, well, why would China do this? This could mess up their shipping lanes. They're invested in Taiwan, all this kind of good stuff. And the reason I disagree is not in a way that I think Albert is wrong, but that I think it's almost, for lack of a better term, it's the wrong type of rationality. In the sense of, if we look at, well, why is China picking a fight with India in, a frozen ground on the Himalayas at 25,000 feet? It makes no sense. I mean, there's little logical reason. I mean, and they've successfully turned India against them. I mean, they're kicking out Chinese apps as fast as they can find them. And, they're looking to start an Indian smartphone market and all this kind of good stuff. Very little action has provoked a very large reaction from India. So just because Albert's rationality in a way is perfectly accurate, I don't think that necessarily captures the reality of what I would call Chinese rationality of the logic that they're using to make those decisions and the risks they're willing to take.
Okay. So before we swing to you, Albert, let me ask you this. So if we take the Hong Kong scenario and we talk about the salami slicing that Chris talked about, after the umbrella revolution in 2014, intel I was hearing out of China was that the decision was made in Beijing that Hong Kong would lose its status as a global financial center. And it was just a matter of time, right? Mm-hmm. And we've hit that point effectively. Okay. Hong Kong is not a place where unless you want risk, where you're going to necessarily park your assets, that sort of thing. It's taken 5 years. They were patient. and it seems to me they're beyond the tipping point. So it was that kind of salami slicing approach to taking away the credibility of Hong Kong, but also injecting the inevitability of Chinese ownership. Is it possible that that can happen with Taiwan?
Of course, it's certainly possible. There's no question about that. Do I think it's possible in the next 18 months? Absolutely. Like even Chris agrees. I don't think that's going to happen in 18 months. There's no Chinese buildup militarily for Taiwan invasion. If you were to look at like every single military offensive project has logistics involved. There's none piling up. I mean, the United States would see that in satellite images well in advance. However, back to the Himalayas, which I think is something we should rather key on if you want to talk about India slicing away stuff. There is a rationale for the Himalayan conflict. It's the watershed. They need that water. And they've been piping that water into agricultural areas in China for years now. And they haven't done too much of it because it's going to really upset India. I mean, you have 1 billion people in India versus 1 billion people in China that needs fresh water. It's going to be a problem. They've built mountaintop bases. They have built up a military presence there. That's where I would actually focus in the next 18 months as a real skirmish. This Taiwan thing, I completely agree. It's well within the Chinese game playbook to slice away and just wait for their time. But a Taiwanese invasion would be extremely costly for the Chinese. The risk reward for the Chinese right now to even think about venturing into Taiwan would cost them significant military losses, significant economic losses. It would ruin some BRI projects. It would ruin the perception of China as some sort of growing superpower. There's just so many negatives that I can't see any real generals in the PLA telling Xi that this is a good idea. Now, that's not to say that Xi won't do it anyways, because it's Xi,
Tony, let me ask a question. So, Albert, from some of the people I've talked to is they say actually they see the military risks increase significantly to Taiwan based upon hardware that's getting onboarded in the PLA and things like that. They see the risks to Taiwan's increase significantly post about 2022. Okay. Yeah, would you share a similar outlook?
Well, so you have to understand, when it comes to like offensive versus defensive capabilities, the defense always has a clear-cut advantage, right? Offensively, it takes $7 per $1 of offensive spending to actually take over now. Without a doubt, China would win over the long term. But at what cost? What cost is that going to? What cost will the PLA Navy take? I mean, the Taiwanese defenses are no joke. They're well equipped to at least hold them off for quite a long time. And to invade it, even the PLA officers, that's a social structure. That's a social ladder, realistically. How would it look like for Xi if the firstborn son of some of these elite families are coming home in body bags?